is Audacy legal insider Amy Dash. Amy, thanks for joining us tonight. I know you've been busy covering this story. From the information you've been able to gather, sort of give us a blueprint of what you see in the legal issues that right now Alvin Kamara is having to deal with.
Obviously, the most important thing is that police say that the whole incident was captured on surveillance camera. It took place at a popular club called Dre's Nightclub at the Cromwell Hotel, and it seemed to have started outside of the elevator when there were words exchanged. Kamara told the police that the victim allegedly called his friend ugly, and at that point, the video shows, according to the police, that the victim tries to go into the elevator. Kamara puts his hand on the victim, on his chest. The victim basically pushes it off, and then Kamara, the police say, pushes the victim. And at that point, his associate, Kamara's associate, apparently punches the victim, and then Kamara punches the victim around 8 times, including a couple times once he's on the ground. And then a bunch of people that are sort of with Kamara, the police say, were stomping on and punching this guy while he was on the ground, to the point where he fell unconscious, allegedly. Serious allegations there.
If you have security, isn't security supposed to keep you from this
from
kind of,
getting in trouble like that?
For something like this happening, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a guy like him has a lot to lose, right? Because first of all, if this guy was in fact seriously injured, which is what they're claiming, because they interviewed him in the hospital. Well, then he faces a potential felony charge for battery resulting in substantial bodily injury. So that could net like a 1 to 15-year sentence. It would probably be on the lower side for somebody with no criminal history. Of course, it could be pled down. But it's not just that. I mean, even if he were to get off on probation for this, or even if he were to beat this charge, now there's surveillance video that the NFL can examine, and they can impose a suspension or discipline irrespective of whether there's a criminal charge.
Would it be like a minimum, even not negotiate, like 6-game suspension?
Yeah, it's always a minimum 6 games. That's the baseline for any type of violent crime, or at least the allegation of a violent crime. And remember, the NFL can examine the surveillance video, and if they see that violent force on somebody else, they can make their own determination on whether he essentially committed a crime, whether or not he's adjudged in a court of law. So it would be 6 games, but then there can be additions for aggravating factors. So maybe the fact that if, in fact, he hit this guy while he was down on the ground, if the guy suffered long-standing injuries. I know he has supposedly some sort of serious injury to his eye. So it depends, I think, on the extent of damage and how bad the video is. But it's really arbitrary. It could be 6 games, it could be 8 games, or a lot of times what happens is sometimes they'll get the baseline 6, and then they can appeal that, and sometimes the arbitrator will reduce it a game or 2, so it could actually be less than 6 games. But I think, people have to wonder whether the Saints are going to release him over something like this or keep him. I think maybe he would get a second chance because he's obviously a great player, and he doesn't have like a string of criminal convictions in his record. So, but you just never know. You never know how damning it could be when the front office is examining the video.
So, Amy, is this something that you think could be settled out of court and not actually go to court to face prison time, or something that also, even though if it's, let's say you're not going to court, but how about a civil suit that from a financial standpoint that the victim could also, because Alvin Kamara got a lot of resources, seems like the damages that occurred then, that could be a civil case.
Yeah, there could definitely be a civil case. I'm not sure that there could be a deal on this because in Las Vegas, they're pretty strict because they have an interest in keeping these areas safe. I mean, obviously, that's a hot spot for tourism, especially the nightclubs. So there's a lot of revenue generation and jobs there. So I think they really want to enforce the laws down there, and we've seen it happen. I mean, especially with the O.J. Simpson armed robbery, totally different situation. But there is a reputation in Las Vegas for having a really tough criminal justice system. So I don't even know if a deal would be offered in something like this. His attorneys might have to defend it. On the other hand, maybe if the evidence isn't strong enough, or maybe if the victim's injuries aren't bad enough, it could be potentially a misdemeanor. Whether or not it's a felony will depend on how severe the injuries are and whether the prosecutor feels that they can prove substantial bodily harm in a court of law.
Now, Amy, how significant it is from an attorney standpoint and all, or when you're looking at the evidence that it's all visual and that's something you could see and it's all recorded? I mean, it's not like he said.
I mean, there you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very direct evidence, right? It's conclusive evidence. And also keep in mind that the police are saying that Kamara gave his own version of events that didn't add up to what the video showed.
Oh.
That's not good. If you're, because basically,
well, you can't get in a fight in Las Vegas.
No.
They got cameras everywhere on there.
Everywhere you turn. But Amy, one of the things you brought out was basically what the victim said happened. Las Vegas police agreed with him going back and watch the video. And what you're saying is that when they talked to Alvin, his version of the story was different.
Exactly.
Well, that ain't good.
And so that's going to be tough, right? Because now they've taken a statement from him. So it's showing that, maybe he didn't remember, maybe he wasn't being forthcoming, but if it went to a jury, they would have to draw their own conclusion. So I don't know that they would be motivated to settle or to do a plea deal, I should say. That's the correct terminology. But I think it's just going to come down to how good of a lawyer he gets, which obviously he has the resources for, and how bad the injuries are to the alleged victim. Because like you said, they have the surveillance video, so
right.
They know exactly what happened. They could see it. There's no question. I mean, some people are saying, well, could he raise a self-defense claim? And normally you could, but it's caught on video. So if the police's rendition of events is accurate to the video, what they're saying is that Kamara put his hands on this guy first. And then the guy tried to remove the hands and he pushed him. I don't think you'd have a self-defense claim there because you can't use physical force in response to a verbal insult.
Amy, not to cut you off, but my understanding then his security is the one that threw the first punch.
Oh, yeah, well, I think his associates. But, the fact is he put his hand on the guy.
Okay.
And also what the police are saying is even though his associates may have thrown the first punch, they're saying then Kamara jumped right in and threw his own punches against the guy.
Yeah.
Now, did the guy try to fight back? I don't know. That could matter, but it seems like he was outnumbered. And then take into account the fact that if he's on the ground and it's true that Kamara was punching him repeatedly while he was down, that's not force that's proportionate with what the guy was presenting to Kamara. So it has to be force that's proportionate to be valid self-defense. But it really comes down to who put their hands on the other person first.